Well, what happened was later on, ABC just killed the story. They were the first ones to go with it.
So Harry heard it on the mainstream
media. Oh, yeah, he
first.
heard it on the morning guy on 540 AM Orlando.
Okay.
And he also heard the guy wonder out loud, which is really rich, why they weren't following the story.
Yeah.
Well, that story got kiboshed, and what happened was when the American airline pilots, I believe it was Flight 66, LAX to O'Hare, landed in Chicago, the FBI, debriefed them and told them that was a bottle rocket.
Of course.
Can you dig that? A bottle rocket.
Of course.
Like these guys don't know that something went right past them. Now here's my point. Was that a real terrorist event that wasn't backed or known or set up by the government? And heck, we don't want that going on. So that episode still remains very, very curious. And the story just died in a single day. In fact, in a single morning.
That's a great example, Keith. I mean, first of all, there's probably more than two possibilities, but certainly two that stand out. One is that a lot of these so-called terrorist type things they're terrorists, but they're not terrorists from some foreign terrorist. They're terrorists homegrown, So, I mean, that's one possibility. They also do tests and, training exercises and all kinds of things. But, all right. And the second thing is that if it were something that was, let's say, unexplained and not homegrown or something, they're not, and if at any time they can cover up the truth, they will find a way to do that. And, of course, they consider themselves above the law. It's like I can't tell you how many times I've heard these stories, and I'm talking about from people, not on a news thing, but from people, individuals that I know who have come to me and said, well, this happened, and now they've sent somebody. They've sent somebody to tell me that I'm not allowed to speak about such and such a thing that has happened. Or they've come up with a bizarre, ludicrous explanation of, that was swamp gas. That's the UFO thing again, right? Swamp gas. We get, that's swamp gas or a bottle rocket. It was a pop gun. I mean, anything that they can say. But there's an element. There's a sinister element here, Keith, because there's certainly an element of threat involved, if you understand. In other words, they'll say something like, they'll say it in a way, depending on the person, well, we know where you live. What about your wife? We know where she works. Well, what about your children? We know what school they go to. I mean, in other words, if they decide something is not to be made public or there's going to be a cover-up, that's the way it's going to be. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And also, if I could, I just found this up. We were talking about the boring machines, by the way. And I'm throwing you a curveball here, but people think that's kind of like urban legend, but it's not. The boring machines are real.
They're real.
And you can find them on the internet if you take a look. But I just want to do this. There is an excerpt in Orwell's 1984 where there's this one paragraph that is just loaded with the shape of things to come. And most of us, who listen to the show or we get together with the show hosts, understand Orwell, a.k.a. Eric Blair, as probably being a good guy who was trying to tell us, folks, this is what's going to happen. And in this one paragraph, he talks about new weapons that are being, developed as we speak, which back then was in the mid-40s.
Yes.
And he said, and let me take a look here, because the other ones he mentioned all came to pass, and this is another one. He said, okay, others, meaning scientists, strive to produce a vehicle that shall bore its way under the soil like a submarine underwater. And, he talked about a lot more about what was going on. He said in the vast laboratories of the Ministry of Peace and in the experimental stations hidden in Brazil forests or in the Australian desert or on lost islands of Antarctic, teams of experts are indefatigably at work trying to come up with, and I'm just going to do this real quick, deadlier gases, more powerful explosives, larger rocket bombs, breeds of disease germs immunized against all possible antibodies. You know what I'm saying? In other words, everybody looks at this and says, oh, it's science fiction, what's the big deal?
Oh, no, it's not.
No, and here you have it, and we've seen it all come to pass.
Oh, absolutely, Keith. I can tell you right now, and I'm going to stop trying to get away from this subject since we seem to be heading toward it, but some of this stuff that they've got, might as well talk about it. I can tell you that just some of the things that I witnessed, and some of them were I witnessed and experienced inside these black operations, but some of them I witnessed in doing investigations. But I have seen anti-gravity technology. I've seen what it can do. I've seen cloaking devices that they have for the military. You know what a cloaking device is?
Yes.
To make somebody invisible. In fact, I even had the photos of some of these things, but they were stolen. I had break-ins in my house, and this is a long time ago. But I was working at the time with some people that were going to make some of these things public, and there were many threats and stolen materials and all kinds of things. I mean, this stuff is real, Keith. And the one thing that I'm sure you do know, just from your own research all these years, is that a lot of the technology that's out there, when it comes to the public knowledge, for instance, let's say it's some kind of new thing, even things that might be considered to be UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or really high-tech, aircraft of some kind. Once somebody sees this or knows about it, that's in the public, like in other words, once they admit that it exists, you better believe it's been out there for decades. That's the way it works. They present it as if, oh, this is a new device. This is the cutting edge, but it isn't. It isn't. It's been out there for a very, very long time.
Well, I think evidence of that is, and this is what led me to where I am today. Unwittingly, I was doing an independent project for graduate school, and I was allowed to pick whatever I wanted to do, hence it was independent. And I took a look at the way that science fiction writers, or futuristic writers we might call them now, depicted the way the world might be at the turn of the 20th into the 21st century. And a lot of the names whose books I read were, it was Orwell, Philip K. Dick, Anthony Burgess. And I realized, and then I heard it in an interview once, said, look, if it's happening now, they had it in R&D 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's why I think these guys, these writers, I'm not saying they were in on it, but they were privy somehow, some way.
They were privy.
Yeah,
they had to be. And there's another element here too, and maybe it's not really bizarre, but it's a little, it's a little different, let's say it that way. But remember this, that some of the people that they used, including me, in some of these black operations, especially when they involved some of the paranormal stuff. I mean, we're talking about metaphysics here, and yet, the people that were chosen for some of these projects were chosen because they have capabilities, and I mean capabilities of what I would call them as gifts of the Spirit that God Almighty has bestowed on me. I'm clairvoyant and I'm telepathic and all that. And what they do is they twist these gifts of the Spirit, and they use them for their own ends. I mean, that's Satan's work. It's taking a person, a human being that God has given these gifts to you. We're supposed to use these gifts for healing, to love people, to heal people, like laying on of hands, to pray, a prayer warrior, whatever, for God's work. You're not supposed to use this to do harm to people, and that's what they've done, Keith. They've twisted everything around. They've attempted to usurp the power of God. So in some cases, I would say that some of the writers, all right, to go about it the long way around, but I got there, some of the writers may have had these abilities, and they may have been able to see into the future, or see